Hello, Self-Love Life 101ers. Welcome back to my channel. I'm so happy to be back with you guys today. We are doing something fun today. I'm going to teach you how to knit. Now, knitting is one of my ultimate self-love hobbies. It makes me happy, it keeps me busy, and it allows me to continuously use my hands. I love knitting. And I taught myself how to knit on YouTube. So as a means of paying it forward on the self-love journey, I thought it was only right to teach you how to knit too. Let's get this party started. Hey, y'all know I got my coffee. All right. So first of all, I'm just going to give you a basic definition. What is knitting? Knitting, okay, is a process of using yarn or some other kind of thread, right? But typically it's yarn to create something. You can create scarves or hats or gloves. You can create anything you want with knitting. Knitting is used with 2 needles, okay? You need 2 needles. I'm going to talk about the needles in a second, but you need 2 needles to learn how to knit. You need some yarn, and that's pretty much it. Now, you can get yarn and needles. You can get it online. You can typically get it at a store called Michael's, which is an arts and crafts store. I personally love going to Michael's to just look through the yarn and get new things. I also like ordering online because my life is pretty busy. As a mom and as a wife, and so I always have a lot of things to do, and then also just with my career. So I typically order things online, but when I get a chance to go to Michael's, I do. So many people have been asking me on my personal page, hey, I want to learn how to knit. How'd you learn how to knit? So let me tell you a little bit about my knitting journey. I started knitting about 18 months ago. I tried to knit in the past many times, but couldn't figure it out. I tried to teach myself actually in high school. I checked out a book out of the library. I was that kid. And I tried to figure it out, and I wasn't able to figure it out, but I was able to figure out crocheting. Crocheting, unlike knitting, you only use 1 needle. So I crochet also, and I have my crochet needles here. So unlike the 2 needles, it's just 1 needle for crochet. You can see that, okay? So I typically do both, though. I love doing both. If you guys are interested in learning how to crochet, I can also do that video as well. But I'm going to focus on knitting for this video, but just to share a little bit about my own personal history and how I came to be. So about 18 months ago, about 1.5 years, it could be 2 years, I can't remember, I said, I really want to learn how to knit. I'm going to learn. And I started again watching up YouTube videos, and there's so many YouTube videos trying to teach people how to knit. I couldn't get any of them. So my goal was that when I learned, and I did learn from a great YouTube channel called RJ Knits. Shout out to RJ Knits. And I don't know if you can tag people on YouTube, but RJ Knits, he had the best video, and he showed me how to knit. So I wanted to create a video where I just show you guys how to knit. Okay? So you get your yarn. If you're a beginner, I suggest you start off with bamboo needles. These bamboo needles, okay, do you see that? Are also, they're made of wood. And the reason why they're a little bit easier to get started with is because unlike the other needles that may be made of plastic, they're less slippery. So everything is not going to slide off. Now, I did start my first knitting project, which was a scarf. And I started it with plastic needles, and it was, it was a hot mess. I won't even... And also give yourself time. It's not going to be easy. It's not going to be perfect. So the first thing you want to do when you learn how to knit is you want to take out your yarn, so you get the end of the yarn, okay? So this is a nice multicolored yarn that I have, that I've still been trying to figure out what else I want to make with it. I did make a necklace with it, and I'll show you all the fun things that I've made. You want to get the end of your yarn, okay? And you want to do what is called a slip knot. This is step one in learning how to knit. So a slip knot is basically, you want to leave a tail. This is called the tail end of the yarn, okay? So you see that? You want to, and you just want to do this, make a loop, and then you're just going to pull this through, okay? You see that? You see that? All right, so I'll show you again. You're going to make a loop, like so, and then you're just pulling this through. You're pulling the tail end through the yarn, like so. There's your slip knot. That's step one, making a slip knot, okay? Now, once you have that slip knot, you're going to take one needle, okay, one needle. You're going to put your needle in there, okay? And then you're going to put some stitches on there, okay? So before you start using needle number 2, you make your slip knot, you put the number of stitches. So for example, if you're making a washcloth, typically that's like, you're putting on like maybe 20 stitches because it's not going to be that big. So the amount of stitches that you put on is basically connected to the length of your project, okay? So I'm going to make this small. So once you make your slip knot, you move the tail end to your right side, especially if you are a righty like me, okay? And then when you put your slip knot there, okay, then you're just going to make a few, you're going to start casting on. All right, so once you have your slip knot, you're going to cast on your stitches. Casting on is done with one needle, and you can cast on, you see that? You can cast on how many you're going to need for your project, okay? So I'm going to cast on 10 stitches. So what you do is you take the yarn, you put it over your thumb and your index finger like so. You see that? Okay, so I take the yarn, I put it over my thumb and my index finger like so, and then I'm just going to cast on. So that's 1. Cast on. That's 2. Cast on. That's 3, and so on and so forth. So that's casting on. Okay, so you do how many you need. Okay, so I'm going to do a few here just so you can see what I'm doing. You see that? Now once you've casted on how much you need, and you can find patterns and stuff, you can find them in books, you can find them online. Ravelry.com is great for this. You can also find them in books. I love this particular book. It is called The Knitting Bible. I highly recommend this book. There are a bunch of different patterns that you could use in this book, and it'll tell you how much you need to cast on, etc. So once you've casted on exactly how many stitches you need, I'll show you how to do a basic knit stitch. A knit stitch is the first stitch that you learn how to do. So how you do it is, and I'm just going to get closer, okay? Can you see that? I'm going to, now you're adding needle number 2. Here's where it gets tricky. You're going to put it into your first stitch. So these are called stitches. You put it into the loop, because this is a knit stitch. You put it into the front, okay? You see that? And then you're going to bring the yarn. Now this is the yarn that's attached to the ball. You're going to bring the yarn around the needle that has the stitches on them. And then, let me show you. So you put it in. You're going to wrap the yarn around the new needle that you've added, and then you're going to just pull that loop out like this. See? All right, so I'll do it again so you can see. You're going to go into the next stitch, put the yarn attached to the ball of yarn, okay, wrap it around the back, and you just pull that loop up. You go in, you go in, and sometimes, you know, try not to put it too tight. Wrap this ball of yarn around the back of that needle. That's it. And as you can see, and so then all of these stitches are going to now move to this side, okay? So I'll just finish it up so you can see. Okay, so you see, you'll do that. You'll keep knitting. So all these stitches will start to move onto the other needle, okay? You'll see all those stitches moving on to the other needle. Okay? And now I've got 2 more, and you'll see that it's moving onto the other needle. See that? And now I've got 2 more left on this side. See that? I'm moving that. And I've got 1 more stitch. And that's it. So now you will have all those stitches on this side. You have a row of knit stitches. And then you just keep going, right? It's really that easy. Figuring out what your grip is like, so that was hard for me. I could figure out the stitches, but the grip with the 2 needles was very hard for me until I ordered some bamboo needles. So let me show you the bamboo needles that I have. I really recommend these for beginners, and it comes with all sizes, okay? So knitting needles go by size. Every pack of yarn that you buy will tell you the size of the knitting needle that you will need. So for example, for these are 4 millimeters. They're much smaller because this yarn is a much thinner yarn. When I'm doing a different project like a blanket or something like that, then I use bigger needles. So for example, I wanted to show you guys some projects that I'm currently working on. I'm currently working on a scarf for my daughter, which I've been working on for a while because I've been so busy, but I did finish her hat. And so I'm working on this scarf. Now this is a combination of knit stitches and purl stitches, okay? Obviously you can see that I'm using bigger needles for this project because this yarn is thicker. So these needles are 8 millimeters, okay? So they're like double the size of this because the yarn is different. So that's how you know which needles to use. The yarn will always tell you what size needles to use. I highly recommend, if you're interested in getting started with knitting, to invest in your needles and to invest in some yarn. So this is a scarf I'm making for my daughter. You can do it too. And I want to show you some of the other projects that I've been working on. All right, so I want to show you some of the knitting projects I have been able to make. I made this chunky blanket for my daughter, okay? And I had a lot of fun making this chunky blanket. It's huge, okay? And this pattern I got in the book, the Knitting Bible. It's very simple stitches, knits and purls. Really enjoyed making this, and my daughter uses this every single day when she goes to bed. So I made this huge thing. I did use chunky yarn, really large yarn, and I used 6 skeins of yarn. So that's yarn language. A skein is literally the ball of yarn, okay? So this was 6 skeins, and I was able to make this very quickly. When you use bigger yarn, for example, you are able to create a bigger project faster. This hat I made for my son. This is also a knit stitch. This is a combination of knits and purls to create like a cable stitching there. Okay. I also created, my daughter likes these colors. I also made my daughter a hat. Hers is much larger because she has much more hair than my son, and she's also a little bit older, so I made this hat for her. And this is more of a seed stitch pattern. You'll start knowing what the patterns are over time. So these are some of the things that I've been able to create while knitting. I would say also, apart from, you know, the things you create, in terms of self-love, knitting has really helped me with just controlling my energy, on my self-love journey, being calm. Sometimes when I'm feeling very anxious, I start knitting and I feel better all of a sudden. Similar to exercise in my life, knitting has really just served this really powerful purpose of being patient, because it doesn't always turn out perfectly, but I continue to do it anyway. So I really encourage you to learn how to knit. So one more time for the knit stitch, right? If you forgot. Okay? And so your work is always moving from one needle to the next. Okay? So that's what makes knitting pretty cool. All right? So when you complete that row, see that? I put the needle right through that loop, like so. Putting it in through that front loop. What's attached to the ball of yarn, you're wrapping it, you're doing, okay, around that needle, and then you're just pulling the loop out from under with the needle. That's it. And then you just keep going. You just keep doing your thing. And you listen, what I love about it is you can be watching TV and you're just like, yeah, girl, because I said what? Yes, what, girl? And it's so great. And then you're creating something so cool. And you can create things for yourself. You can create a lot of gifts for people. You can create a lot of things for your family. And what I love is that you're constantly learning. I would highly recommend, once again, getting the Knitting Bible. It is super helpful. I also make a lot of other things like earrings and necklaces. And I typically, for the necklaces and things of that nature, I do crochet. But I like knitting too, and I like having both skills, and I like turning on those skills whenever I feel like it. So if you're interested in learning how to knit, I hope this video helped you. Please rate, comment, and subscribe. And remember that on your self-love journey, having different hobbies and interests is what continues to keep the mind and the brain sharp. It also allows us to explore these other sides of ourselves that we may not be thinking about all the time. You can learn how to knit, add knitting to your self-love journey. Please rate, comment, and subscribe. And I look forward to seeing you guys in the next video. Peace.